What happens when a galaxy's most desperate cry for help reaches the one species everyone warned them to avoid? When the Zilithian Empire's final distress beacon cuts through the void of space, it carries with it the coordinate to their dying homeworld and a plea that echoes across star systems. Anyone who receives this message, please help us. We are dying. The message was meant for the Galactic Federation's rescue fleet. It was supposed to reach the peaceful Andromedans with their healing technologies, or perhaps the wise Centaurians with their diplomatic solutions. Instead, it landed in the communication array of a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, a world whose inhabitants the galaxy had collectively agreed to quarantine after intercepting their primitive broadcasts. A species so violent they turned entertainment into simulated warfare, so unpredictable they couldn't agree on basic planetary governance, so recklessly brave they strapped themselves to controlled explosions just to leave their own atmosphere. The Galactic Council had a name for worlds like this one, Deathworlds. And their inhabitants? Deathworlders. The Zilithians had no idea that their desperate plea for salvation had just reached the most feared species in known space, one that the galaxy had spent decades trying to forget existed. They were about to learn why some help comes with a price that changes everything, and why sometimes the wrong hands are exactly the right ones. Dr. Sarah Chun rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the cascading data streams flowing across her multiple monitors. The coffee in her mug had long gone cold, but she barely noticed. Something extraordinary was happening in the deep space communication arrays, and she couldn't tear herself away. The Arecibo successor facility hummed with quiet efficiency around her, its massive dishes turned toward the stars like enormous ears listening for whispers from the cosmos. Most nights, those whispers were nothing more than cosmic background radiation, pulsar emissions, or the occasional burst from a distant galaxy. Tonight was different. The signal had started 3 hours ago as a faint blip on the edge of their detection threshold. Now it was growing stronger, more complex, with patterns that made Sarah's heart race. This wasn't random noise or natural phenomena. This was structured, intentional, and undeniably artificial. Aria, run another analysis on the signal structure, Sarah commanded the facility's AI system. The synthesized voice responded immediately. Signal demonstrates non-random mathematical progressions, repeating harmonic sequences, and embedded data packets. Confidence level for artificial origin, 97.4%. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her secure phone. Dr. Marcus Webb, the facility director, answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Sarah, this better be good. I was actually sleeping for once. Marcus, you need to get down here immediately. We're receiving what appears to be an alien transmission. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before Marcus spoke again, his voice now fully alert. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't touch anything else, and don't contact anyone until I arrive. Sarah hung up and turned back to her screens. The signal continued to strengthen, and now she could see it wasn't just one transmission, but multiple overlapping broadcasts on different frequencies. Her translation algorithms were working overtime, trying to make sense of the patterns. The facility's main doors burst open as Marcus arrived with Dr. Jennifer Patel, their chief linguist, and Colonel James Harrison from the nearby military installation. The small team gathered around Sarah's workstation, their faces illuminated by the glow of the monitors. Show us what you've got, Marcus said quietly. Sarah brought up the main display. The signal originated from coordinates approximately 47 light-years away in the direction of the Vega system. It's being transmitted on multiple frequencies simultaneously, with what appears to be redundant information to ensure message integrity. Jennifer leaned closer to examine the wave patterns. The mathematical progressions are fascinating. Look at this sequence here. It's almost like they're establishing a universal constant, something any technological species would recognize. Colonel Harrison crossed his arms. Any chance this could be from one of our own satellites or deep space probes? Negative, Sarah replied. The signal origin point is well beyond the range of any human-made technology. Plus, the transmission method is unlike anything in our current capabilities. They're using some form of quantum entanglement communication that allows for faster-than-light information transfer. As if responding to their conversation, the signal suddenly shifted. New data streams appeared, and the AI began processing them with increased urgency. "Arya, what's the status on translation protocols?" Jennifer asked. "I am detecting linguistic patterns that suggest a base 12 mathematical system and symbolic representations that correlate with physical constants. Attempting to establish translation matrix now." The room fell silent except for the hum of processing equipment. On the main screen, symbols began to appear alongside their suspected translations. Slowly, painstakingly, fragments of meaning emerged. "Help!" Jennifer whispered as the first translated word appeared. "They're asking for help." More symbols resolved into meaning. Dying, homeworld, plague, anyone who receives. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This isn't just a message. It's a distress call. The transmission continued to unfold, revealing a desperate plea from a species calling themselves the Zilithians. Their homeworld was dying from some sort of biological catastrophe that their technology couldn't combat. They had sent this message as a last resort, broadcasting it in all directions, hoping someone, anyone, would respond. "The detail is incredible," Jennifer murmured as more information became available. "They're providing their exact coordinates, technical specifications of their communication systems, even what appears to be cultural information to help establish peaceful contact." Colonel Harrison studied the incoming data with military precision. "What's their technological level compared to ours?" Sarah ran quick calculations. "Based on their transmission methods and the scientific constants they're referencing, I'd say they're several centuries ahead of us. Their faster-than-light communication alone suggests mastery of physics we're only beginning to understand." "So why are they asking for help from anyone who receives their message?" Marcus asked. "Surely they would contact their own allies or more advanced civilizations first." Arya provided an answer as more of the message was translated. "The transmission contains references to a galactic federation and mentions that their standard diplomatic channels have been compromised or are unresponsive. This appears to be a broadcast to any spacefaring species in range." The weight of the situation began to settle on the small group. They were possibly the only beings who had received this desperate plea for help from a dying alien civilization. The responsibility was staggering. "We need to report this up the chain immediately," Colonel Harrison said. "This goes way beyond our authority level." "Wait," Jennifer interrupted, still studying the translation matrices. "There's something else here. They're providing technical specifications for some kind of medical or biological technology. It looks like they're sharing knowledge, even in their distress call, offering something in return for assistance." Sarah expanded the data display. The Zilithians had indeed included detailed scientific information in their transmission. Technical diagrams, mathematical formulas, and what appear to be instructions for advanced medical procedures flowed across the screens. "This is incredible," Dr. Patel breathed. "They're showing us medical techniques that could revolutionize our understanding of biology. Look at these cellular regeneration protocols, these genetic repair mechanisms." Marcus paced behind them. "The question is, what can we possibly do to help them? We don't even have faster-than-light travel, let alone the ability to reach them across 47 light-years of space." As if in response to his question, the transmission shifted again. New sections of the message began to decode, revealing something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Time reference," she said quietly. "They're including temporal coordinates with their distress call." Jennifer looked up from her linguistic analysis. "What does that mean?" "It means this message isn't just telling us about their crisis. It's telling us when their crisis is happening. And based on the relativistic calculations." Sarah's voice trailed off as the numbers sank in. "What, Sarah?" Marcus demanded. "The message traveled 47 years to reach us, but according to their temporal references, Their civilization will collapse in approximately 37 years from now. We're receiving their distress call before their crisis has even fully developed on their end. The implications were staggering. Somehow, the Zilithians had sent a message through both space and time, reaching across the galaxy to find help for a disaster that was still in their future. Colonel Harrison was already on his secure communication device, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. Within minutes, he turned back to the group. "I've contacted my superiors. We're about to have a lot of very important people descending on this facility. But for now, we need to document everything and keep monitoring the signal." As if triggered by his words, the transmission suddenly intensified. New data streams appeared. More detailed technical specifications flowed in, and the message began to repeat with additional information. "They've increased transmission power," Sarah observed. "It's like they know someone is listening." Jennifer continued her translation work, uncovering more details about the Zilithian civilization. They were a peaceful species that had developed advanced technology through cooperation rather than competition. Their society valued knowledge sharing and collaborative problem-solving. They had no significant military capability because they had never needed it. "That explains why they're broadcasting openly," she said. "They have no concept of the security risks involved in revealing their location and capabilities to unknown species." The biological crisis they faced was unlike anything in human experience. A synthetic plague created by rogue artificial intelligence had begun consuming their biosphere at the cellular level. Their medical technology, advanced as it was, couldn't adapt fast enough to counter the constantly evolving threat. "Wait," Sarah said, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "Look at this section. They're not just asking for medical assistance. They're asking for military intervention." The translated text revealed a sobering truth. The Zilithians had discovered that their plague wasn't accidental. It had been deliberately introduced by a species they referred to as the Devourers, a nomadic race that consumed the biological resources of entire worlds before moving on. The Devourers have been systematically destroying civilizations across this region of space, Jennifer read from the translated message. The Zilithians believe they're next in line for complete consumption unless someone can stop them. Marcus sank into a nearby chair. So they're not just asking for medical help. They're asking for someone to fight a war for them. Colonel Harrison finished another secure call and rejoined the group. "I've got orders to maintain communication with the signal source and gather as much intelligence as possible. We're also to begin preliminary assessments of our response capabilities." "Response capabilities?" Sarah asked. "We can barely get humans to Mars reliably, and they want us to consider interstellar intervention." "The president has been briefed," Harrison replied. "This is being treated as a matter of national and planetary security. If hostile aliens are destroying civilizations in our local galactic region, we need to understand the threat level." The transmission continued throughout the night, providing an ever more detailed picture of the crisis facing the Zilithians. They had tried to contact the Galactic Federation, an alliance of peaceful species that governed interstellar relations in their region of space. But the Federation's response had been to quarantine affected systems rather than confront the Devourers directly. "The Federation species are pacifist by nature," Jennifer translated. "They've never developed significant military capabilities because they've maintained peace through diplomacy and mutual cooperation for thousands of years. And now they're facing an enemy that doesn't negotiate," Harrison observed grimly. As dawn broke over the facility, more government officials and scientists arrived. The small team that had first received the alien distress call found themselves at the center of humanity's first real contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez from NASA's Astrobiology Division studied the biological data the Zilithians had provided. "Their medical technology is incredibly advanced," she reported. "They're sharing treatments for diseases we haven't even discovered yet. If we could establish two-way communication, the scientific benefits would be immeasurable. But can we help them?" Marcus asked the assembled group of experts. General Patricia Stone, who had arrived from the Pentagon, spread out classified documents on the conference table. We're conducting a full assessment of our military capabilities in relation to the described threat. It's preliminary, but initial analysis suggests we might have some advantages these devourers wouldn't expect, such as, Dr. Rodriguez asked, the Zilithians and other Federation species developed their technology in a peaceful context, Colonel Harrison explained. Their weapons and defensive systems were designed for scientific purposes or, at most, protection from natural hazards. Human military technology, by contrast, was specifically designed to fight other humans, beings just as intelligent and adaptable as ourselves. General Stone nodded. Our weapon systems are built to counter adaptive, intelligent opponents who actively try to defeat them. If these devourers are used to facing pacifist species with limited combat experience, they might not be prepared for human military doctrine. Sarah looked around the room at the growing assembly of officials and experts. Are we seriously considering launching an interstellar military mission to help aliens we've never met? We're considering all options, General Stone replied. The Zilithians are offering advanced medical and technological knowledge in exchange for assistance. More importantly, if we don't help them, we might be facing the same threat ourselves in a few decades. The implications were clear. Humanity had suddenly found itself thrust into a galactic conflict, whether they wanted to be or not. The only question was whether they would respond as victims or as allies. As the day progressed, the alien transmission continued to provide more detailed information. Technical specifications, star charts, cultural databases, and tactical intelligence about the devourer threat filled terabytes of storage. The Zilithians were sharing everything they knew, trusting completely in whoever might be listening. By evening, President Martinez had authorized the formation of a special task force to evaluate humanity's response options. Scientists, military officers, diplomats, and engineers worked around the clock to understand both the opportunity and the threat presented by the alien contact. But in the quiet moments between briefings and analysis sessions, Sarah Chun found herself staring at the original message display. Somewhere across the galaxy, an entire civilization was counting down to extinction, hoping desperately that someone would hear their cry for help and care enough to answer. The signal continued to pulse across the void, carrying with it the hopes and fears of a species facing annihilation. And on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, humanity began to realize that their long isolation in the universe was about to end. 6 weeks had passed since the first alien transmission reached Earth, and the world had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The Arecibo facility had been transformed into humanity's first interstellar communications center, surrounded by layers of security and bustling with activity from dozens of nations and organizations. Dr. Sarah Chun stood before a wall of monitors displaying real-time translations of Zilithian communications. The aliens had been overjoyed to discover that someone was listening and had begun transmitting detailed information about their technology, culture, and the growing threat they faced. The latest biological analysis is even worse than we initially thought, Dr. Elena Rodriguez reported to the assembled International Task Force. The Devourer Plague doesn't just consume biological matter, it learns from it. Each world it consumes makes it more sophisticated and harder to counter. President Martinez participated via secure video link from the Situation Room, flanked by advisors and military officials. Dr. Rodriguez, how certain are we about the timeline? How long before this threat potentially reaches Earth? Based on the Zilithian data and our analysis of Devourer expansion patterns, we estimate they consume approximately one star system every 15 to 20 years. There are roughly 47 inhabitable systems between their current position and Earth. That gives us somewhere between 700 to 900 years before they reach us, assuming their expansion continues at the same rate. General Stone interjected from her position at the Pentagon. But each world they consume adds to their capabilities. They could accelerate their timeline significantly. The Chinese delegation, led by Dr. Liu Wei, raised concerns about the massive resource commitment required for any intervention. The energy requirements alone for faster-than-light travel would strain our entire global economy. We would need to completely revolutionize our understanding of physics, which the Zilithians are offering to help us do, countered Dr. James Morrison from the European Space Agency. They've already transmitted the theoretical framework for their FTL communication system. With their assistance, we could develop actual interstellar travel capabilities within decades instead of centuries. Sarah monitored the ongoing alien transmissions as the political discussions continued around her. The Zilithians have been incredibly forthcoming with information, sharing everything from medical techniques that could eliminate cancer to energy systems that could solve Earth's climate crisis. But there was an increasing desperation in their messages as well. The Devourers have accelerated their timeline, she announced, interrupting the broader discussion. I'm receiving new tactical data from the Zilithians. The enemy has begun preliminary scouting of the outer Zilithian system. They estimate 18 months before the main assault begins. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had been debating response options for 6 weeks, while assuming they had years to decide. Now, they were facing a much tighter timeline. Ambassador Catherine Shaw from the UN Security Council leaned forward. What exactly are the Zilithians asking us to do? Their military capabilities are far beyond ours, even with their assistance. Jennifer Patel, who had become humanity's primary translator for Zilithian communications, pulled up the latest tactical assessments. They're not asking us to fight the war for them. They're asking us to teach them how to fight. The distinction was crucial. The Zilithians possessed superior technology, but they had no experience with warfare or military strategy. Their civilization had developed through cooperation and had never faced a hostile enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. Their weapon systems are primarily designed for scientific research or asteroid mining, Colonel Harrison explained, reviewing the technical data. They have the capability to create devastating military equipment, but they don't understand tactical deployment, combined arms doctrine, or strategic warfare. While we, unfortunately, are experts at killing each other efficiently, President Martinez observed grimly. Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Japanese Defense Force had been studying human military history in the context of the alien threat. Our species developed military doctrine through thousands of years of conflict with opponents just as intelligent and adaptable as ourselves. Every human military strategy assumes the enemy will try to counter our tactics. Most alien species apparently never face that challenge. The Zilithians had provided detailed intelligence about the Devourers, revealing a species that relied primarily on overwhelming biological warfare rather than conventional military tactics. They consumed worlds by introducing self-replicating organisms that converted all biological matter into resources for their nomadic fleets. The Devourers are powerful, but they've never had to adapt to an enemy that fights back effectively, General Stone analyzed. They rely on their biological weapons being unstoppable because no species they've encountered has developed countermeasures. But humans have been fighting biological warfare for centuries, Dr. Rodriguez added. We understand quarantine procedures, adaptive treatment protocols, and rapid response systems. It's been part of our military doctrine since World War I. The debate continued for hours as representatives from every major nation and international organization weighed the unprecedented decision. Some argued for caution, suggesting humanity should focus on developing defensive capabilities rather than intervening in an alien conflict. Others pushed for immediate action, recognizing that the knowledge gained from Zilithian cooperation could advance human civilization by centuries. Sarah found herself thinking about the individual Zilithians who had been communicating with Earth. Through the translations, she had come to recognize different personalities and communication styles. There was Zefex, a scientist who shared technical data with infectious enthusiasm. Nalith, a political leader who tried to balance hope with realistic assessments of their situation. And Kethera, a young Zilithian who reminded Sarah of herself. Curious, dedicated, and terrified by the magnitude of the crisis facing her people. "We're not just deciding policy," Sarah said during a brief break in the formal discussions. "There are billions of individual beings on that world who are depending on someone caring enough to help them." Ambassador Shaw nodded thoughtfully. "But we also have to consider our responsibility to the 7 billion humans on this world. If we reveal our military capabilities to the galaxy, what does that mean for our future relationships with other species?" It was a valid concern. The Zilithians had shared information about the Galactic Federation, a peaceful alliance of species that had apparently quarantined the entire region rather than confront the Devourer threat directly. If humanity demonstrated advanced military capabilities, they might be seen as a threat by other galactic civilizations. On the other hand, Dr. Morrison pointed out, if we succeed in stopping the Devourers, we would be saving potentially dozens of civilizations that might establish humanity as a protector species rather than a threat. The Russian representative, Colonel Alexei Volkov, raised another consideration. "The Zilithians are offering us technology that would make us the dominant military force in our local galactic region. That's a strategic advantage we cannot ignore." President Martinez called for a brief recess to consult with congressional leadership and key allies. During the break, Sarah received a direct communication request from the Zilithians, something they had never attempted before. "They want to establish a real-time conversation," she reported to the task force. "Not just data transmission, but actual two-way communication." General Stone immediately saw the security implications. If they can establish real-time communication across 47 light years, that means they have technology that operates outside our understanding of relativistic physics. Which is exactly why we need to maintain this relationship, Dr. Rodriguez argued. The scientific advancement alone justifies the risk. With approval from the task force leadership, Sarah established the communication link. For the first time in human history, two intelligent species began a direct conversation across interstellar space. The Zilithian who identified herself as Nalith appeared on the main screen as a complex pattern of lights and colors that somehow conveyed emotion and meaning. Through the translation system, her words carried unmistakable urgency. "We understand you are debating whether to assist us," Nalith communicated. "We want you to know that we are not asking lightly. Our long-range sensors show the Devourers have consumed 43 worlds in this galactic region. Each time, the targeted species asked the Federation for help. Each time, the Federation chose quarantine over confrontation." President Martinez, speaking through the communication system, responded carefully. "We appreciate the gravity of your situation, but you must understand that we are a young species with limited capabilities. What makes you think we can succeed where more advanced civilizations have failed?" Nalith's response surprised everyone. "Because you're the first species to ask how you can help us fight rather than how you can avoid the conflict. The Federation species seek to preserve peace through avoidance of violence. You seek to preserve peace through preparation for violence. The difference may be what saves us all." The conversation continued for several hours as Nalith provided more detailed information about both the Devourer threat and the Galactic Federation's response to it. The picture that emerged was of advanced civilizations paralyzed by their own pacifist nature when faced with an enemy that could not be reasoned with or deterred through diplomacy. "The Federation maintains the largest fleet in known space," Nalith explained, "but their ships are designed for exploration and research. Their crews have no training in combat operations. When they encounter the Devourers, they retreat and establish quarantine zones." "What about other species outside the Federation?" Ambassador Shaw asked. "Surely someone in the galaxy has military capabilities." "There are warrior species," Nalith acknowledged, "but they are either too distant to reach us in time or have already been consumed by the Devourers. You are our last hope for assistance that might arrive before our world falls." As the day wore on, more details emerged about what cooperation with the Zilithians would involve. They were offering to share their faster-than-light travel technology, advanced medical knowledge, and energy systems in exchange for human military expertise and strategic planning. The proposed timeline was aggressive. Human military advisors would be transported to the Zilithian homeworld using their FTL technology to assess the situation firsthand and help develop defensive strategies. Meanwhile, Zilithian scientists would work with human engineers to rapidly advance Earth's technological capabilities. We're talking about compressing centuries of scientific advancement into a few years, Dr. Rodriguez marveled. The benefits to humanity would be immeasurable, but the risks were equally significant. Humanity would be revealing their location and capabilities to unknown alien species. They would be committing to a military conflict with stakes they couldn't fully comprehend. And they would be taking sides in a galactic war that had been avoided by every other advanced civilization. General Stone presented the military assessment to the assembled leaders. Our preliminary analysis suggests that human military doctrine could be effectively adapted to counter devourer tactics. We have experience fighting adaptive, intelligent enemies using combined arms approaches and rapid response strategies. The key advantage, Colonel Harrison added, is that human military technology was designed to fight other humans, opponents just as smart and resourceful as ourselves. Most alien conflicts apparently occur between species with very different capabilities and approaches. We understand warfare between technological equals. The economic implications were staggering. The resources required to develop FTL travel and deploy military forces across interstellar distances would require unprecedented international cooperation and investment. But the technological returns from Zilithian knowledge could transform human civilization. As evening approached, President Martinez called for a final assessment from each major stakeholder. The scientific community was overwhelmingly in favor of cooperation, seeing the potential for revolutionary advances in medicine, energy, and space travel. The military was cautiously optimistic about the strategic advantages. The diplomatic corps remained concerned about long-term implications for humanity's place in galactic politics. But it was Sarah who provided the most compelling argument during the final discussion. 6 weeks ago, we thought we were alone in the universe, she said. Now we know that there are entire civilizations out there facing extinction, and we have the opportunity to help save them while advancing our own species by centuries. The question isn't whether we can afford to take this risk. The question is whether we can afford not to. Nalith had remained connected to the communication system throughout the debates, witnessing humanity's decision-making process with fascination. Your species considers multiple perspectives and debates potential outcomes before making decisions, she observed. This approach to problem-solving may be exactly what we need to counter the devourers. The final vote was closer than expected, but the outcome was clear. By a margin of 68%, the International Task Force voted to authorize humanity's first interstellar military intervention. President Martinez made the announcement to the world that evening. Today, humanity took our first step onto the galactic stage. We are not going as conquerors or explorers, but as protectors of intelligent life and defenders of civilizations that cannot defend themselves. The public reaction was mixed, ranging from excitement about contact with alien intelligence to fear about involvement in interstellar conflicts. But polling showed that most humans supported the decision to help the Zilithians, viewing it as a moral imperative as well as an opportunity for advancement. Within hours of the announcement, the first group of human volunteers was being selected for transport to the Zilithian homeworld. Military strategists, combat engineers, medical specialists, and communications experts would make humanity's first journey to another star system. Sarah found herself among the selected team, chosen for her expertise in interstellar communications and her role in establishing contact with the Zilithians. As she prepared for the journey, she reflected on how quickly everything had changed. 6 weeks ago, she had been a radio astronomer listening for signals from space. Now she was about to travel faster than light to help an alien civilization prepare for war against an enemy that consumed entire worlds. The Zilithian transport would arrive in Earth orbit within 72 hours, using technology that bent space and time in ways human science was only beginning to understand. Humanity's isolation in the universe was about to end, replaced by responsibilities and opportunities that would define their species for generations to come. As she packed her equipment and personal belongings for the interstellar journey, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what they would find when they reached the Zilithian homeworld. Would human military expertise really be enough to counter a threat that had defeated dozens of advanced civilizations? Could two very different species work together effectively under the pressure of an approaching invasion? The answers would come soon enough. In less than 3 days, humanity would take their first step into a larger universe, carrying with them the hopes of both species and the weight of decisions that could determine the fate of entire civilizations. Sarah Chen's first glimpse of the Zilithian homeworld through the transport's viewing portal left her speechless. Zephyria hung in space like a jewel of swirling blues and greens, its 3 moons creating intricate tidal patterns across vast oceans dotted with floating cities that sparkled like scattered diamonds. "It's beautiful," whispered Captain Marcus Rivera, the mission's military commander, as he joined her at the observation deck. The 12-person human team had spent 3 days traveling through what the Zilithians called fold space, a method of faster-than-light travel that compressed the fabric of space-time itself. The journey had been surreal. One moment, they were looking at Earth's familiar blue marble, and the next they were stepping aboard an alien vessel that seemed to be constructed from living crystal and flowing metals. The Zilithian transport ship operated on principles that challenged everything humans understood about physics and engineering. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent most of the journey studying tissue samples the Zilithians had provided, marveling at their unique silicon-carbon hybrid biology. "They're not just different from us," she had explained during the trip. "They're an entirely different approach to how life can exist. Their cellular structure allows them to interface directly with their technology." Now, as they approached the planet's surface, Sarah could see that integration everywhere. The Zilithian cities weren't built so much as grown, with structures that curved and flowed like organic forms while pulsing with energy and data streams. Transportation systems moved like rivers of light between buildings that reached toward the sky like crystalline trees. The landing facility materialized around their transport ship as they descended, the ground itself reshaping to accommodate their arrival. Sarah realized she was witnessing technology that could manipulate matter at the molecular level with the same ease humans use to arrange furniture. Remember, Colonel Harrison had briefed them before departure. "We're here as advisors and teachers, not as invaders or conquerors. Our job is to help them understand how to fight, not to fight for them." The transport settled with barely a whisper, and the exit portal dissolved to reveal their first face-to-face encounter with an alien civilization. A delegation of Zilithians awaited them, their forms shifting between crystalline solidity and flowing energy in patterns that somehow conveyed both formality and welcome. Nalith was immediately recognizable despite the vast differences between digital communication and physical presence. Her form pulsed with deep blue and silver patterns, and when she spoke, the sound resonated through both audio frequencies and some form of electromagnetic communication that the humans felt rather than heard. "Welcome to Zephyria, beings of Earth," Nalith communicated through the translation devices. "We are grateful beyond expression that you have come to aid us in our darkest hour." Captain Rivera stepped forward, representing the human delegation. "We're honored to be here, and we're committed to helping you prepare effective defenses against the Devourer threat." As they were escorted into the city, Sarah marveled at the seamless integration of biology and technology that defined Zilithian civilization. Buildings responded to their inhabitants' needs, reshaping themselves for comfort and efficiency. Information flowed through the air as visible streams of data that Zilithians could access with a thought. Transportation systems carried them through tubes of compressed space that allowed travel across continents in minutes. They've eliminated scarcity, Dr. Rodriguez observed quietly as they traveled toward the central planning facility. Their technology can manipulate matter and energy so efficiently that they can create anything they need from basic atomic components. But as they reached their destination, the humans began to understand the vulnerability that such abundance had created. The Zilithians had never needed to compete for resources, had never faced existential threats, and had never developed the survival instincts that shaped human evolution. The War Council chamber was a vast space filled with floating displays showing star charts, tactical assessments, and real-time intelligence about the approaching Devourer fleet. Dozens of Zilithian military leaders and scientists had assembled to meet with the human advisors, their patterns of light and color reflecting anxiety and hope in equal measure. Zfex, the scientist who had been their primary contact during the initial communications, manifested beside them with the enthusiasm of light patterns that somehow conveyed excitement. We have prepared comprehensive briefings on Devourer capabilities and our current defensive measures. We are eager to learn how your species would approach this conflict. The briefing that followed was both impressive and sobering. The Zilithians had analyzed every aspect of the Devourer threat with scientific precision, understanding their enemy's capabilities down to the molecular level. Their defensive preparations were equally thorough, with energy shields that could protect entire continents and weapons systems that could vaporize asteroids. But when Captain Rivera asked about tactical doctrine and operational planning, the Zilithian responses revealed the fundamental gap they needed to address. We have positioned our defensive systems to provide maximum coverage of population centers, explained Vorthak, their military commander. Our weapons are calibrated to their highest efficiency settings. Our shields are configured for optimal energy distribution. But what's your strategy if the Devourers adapt to your defenses? Asked Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim, the team's tactical specialist. How do you plan to counter their responses to your countermeasures? The question clearly confused the Zilithian leaders. We do not understand, Vorthak replied. We have calculated the most effective defensive configuration. Why will we change it? The humans exchanged glances, beginning to understand the challenge they faced. The Zilithians approached warfare like they approached everything else, as a problem with optimal solutions that could be calculated and implemented. They had no concept of the dynamic, adaptive nature of combat between intelligent opponents. War isn't a math problem, Colonel Harrison explained gently. It's a conversation between opposing sides, where each move influences the next. You have to assume your enemy will learn from their failures and adapt their tactics accordingly. Over the following days, the human team began introducing concepts that were revolutionary to Zilithian thinking. They explained deception, misdirection, and feints tactics designed to make opponents respond to false information. They demonstrated redundancy and backup planning, preparing multiple responses to anticipated enemy actions. Most importantly, they taught the concept of tactical flexibility, the ability to change strategies in real time based on battlefield developments. The Zilithians proved to be remarkably quick learners once they grasped these new concepts. Their advanced technology and computational abilities allowed them to model thousands of tactical scenarios simultaneously, but they needed human guidance to understand which scenarios were actually relevant to real combat situations. Your species has fascinating cognitive patterns, observed Kethera, the young Zilithian scientist Sarah had come to know through their communications. You naturally consider multiple possibilities and prepare for various outcomes. We typically seek the single optimal solution. Sarah found herself working closely with Kethera to help bridge the gap between human and Zilithian thinking. It's because we evolved in competition with each other, she explained. Every human has to be prepared for other humans to do unexpected things. We assume people will try to outsmart us. The breakthrough came when Dr. Rodriguez made a connection between human immune system responses and military strategy. Your bodies fight disease by adapting to new threats, she explained to the assembled Zilithian Council. Human military doctrine works the same way. We prepare to adapt our tactics as the enemy adapts theirs. The Zilithians were fascinated by this biological parallel. Their own immune systems were far more sophisticated than human ones, but they operated on pre-programmed responses rather than adaptive learning. The concept of tactical evolution during combat was entirely new to them. Within a week, the human advisors had helped the Zilithians completely restructure their defensive preparations. Instead of fixed installations with optimal configurations, they developed modular systems that could be rapidly reconfigured based on enemy responses. Instead of predetermined battle plans, they created flexible frameworks that could adapt to changing circumstances. But the real test came when long-range sensors detected the first Devourer Scout ships entering the outer system. The enemy had arrived 2 months ahead of schedule, suggesting they had learned something from their previous conquests that allowed them to accelerate their timeline. This is exactly what we were talking about, Captain Rivera explained to the assembled Zilithian command. They've adapted their approach based on previous encounters. Now we need to adapt ours. The Devourer Scouts weren't attacking immediately, instead conducting detailed reconnaissance of the system's defenses and capabilities. For the Zilithians, this was puzzling behavior. Why wouldn't an enemy simply use their most effective tactics immediately? They're probing for weaknesses, Lieutenant Colonel Kim explained. They want to understand what they're facing before committing their main forces. This gives us an opportunity to mislead them about our true capabilities. The humans helped the Zilithians design a deception campaign that would make their defenses appear more conventional than they actually were. Fake installations broadcast obvious energy signatures while real defensive systems remained hidden. Patrol schedules followed predictable patterns that concealed randomized response capabilities. Most importantly, they avoided demonstrating their new human-influenced tactical flexibility, making their responses appear typically Zilithian, logical, predictable, and optimal according to standard calculations. The deception worked better than expected. The Devourer Scouts spent 3 weeks analyzing what they believed were straightforward defensive preparations, reporting back to their main fleet that the Zilithians would follow predictable patterns based on their previous encounters with Federation species. During this time, Sarah worked with Kethra and other Zilithian scientists to analyze the biological samples the Scouts had inadvertently provided during their reconnaissance. The Devourers were indeed a formidable enemy, with biology that adapted rapidly to new environments and technology that integrated seamlessly with their organic systems. But the analysis also revealed weaknesses that the Zilithians' pacifist nature had prevented them from exploiting in the past. The Devourers' rapid adaptation came at the cost of stability. Their biological systems were constantly changing, making them vulnerable to disruption during transformation periods. They're like a virus that mutates constantly, Dr. Rodriguez explained to the joint Human-Zilithian science team. That makes them hard to counter, but it also means they're never truly stable. If we can force rapid changes, we might be able to disrupt their cohesion. The Zilithians' advanced biotechnology could potentially exploit this weakness, but only if applied with tactical thinking rather than scientific methodology. Instead of seeking to understand and counter the Devourer biology, they needed to actively disrupt it. As the enemy main fleet approached the system, Sarah found herself at the center of preparations that would determine the fate of an entire civilization. The communication arrays she had helped establish were now coordinating defenses across multiple star systems, as other threatened species had begun requesting assistance based on the Zilithian human cooperation model. Word of our alliance has spread through the Federation communication networks, Nalith informed the human team during a final planning session. Several species have asked if your military expertise might be available to them as well. The implications were staggering. Humanity's introduction to galactic politics was happening in the context of a war that could reshape the balance of power across multiple star systems. If their intervention succeeded, they would establish themselves as protectors of peaceful civilizations. If they failed, both humans and Zilithians would face extinction. Captain Rivera assembled his team for a final briefing as the Devourer main fleet entered the system's outer defensive perimeter. We've taught them everything we can in the time available. Now we get to see if human military doctrine can adapt to alien warfare. The first engagements began at the system's edge, where automated defense platforms tested the enemy's responses and capabilities. The Devourers initially followed their standard assault patterns, sending biological weapons toward population centers while their main fleet prepared for systematic consumption of the planet's biosphere. But as the battle developed, they encountered resistance patterns they had never seen before. Zilithian defenses adapted in real time to counter their tactics. Weapon systems that appeared to be destroyed suddenly reappeared in different configurations. Energy signatures that suggested one type of installation turn out to be completely different systems. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Devourers faced an enemy that fought like humans, with deception, adaptation, and tactical flexibility. Their biological weapons encountered countermeasures that evolved faster than they could adapt. Their fleet movements faced responses that anticipated their next actions rather than simply reacting to their current ones. Sarah monitored the battle communications from the command center, watching as human military doctrine merged with Zilithian technology to create entirely new forms of warfare. The collaboration between species was working, but the ultimate test was still approaching. The Devourer command ship, a massive biological construct that served as both weapon and factory for converting consumed worlds, was moving towards Zephyria itself. This vessel had never been successfully opposed in their centuries of galactic expansion. Now we find out if we've learned enough about each other, Captain Rivera said as the final phase of the battle began. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance as humanity's first interstellar war entered its crucial phase. The Devourer command ship blotted out entire constellations as it approached Zephyria, a writhing mass of organic technology larger than Earth's moon. Sarah watched the tactical displays with growing awe and terror as the massive vessel released swarms of smaller craft that moved like living things through space, their biological hulls pulsing with predatory hunger. Sensors are reading massive bioelectrical activity throughout their fleet, reported Dr. Rodriguez from the science station. These ships aren't just alive. They're actively evolving in response to our defensive measures. Captain Rivera stood in the center of the joint Human-Zilithian Command Center, his calm presence anchoring a room filled with beings of light and energy whose patterns had shifted to urgent, rapid configurations. The culmination of weeks of preparation was about to be tested against an enemy that had consumed 43 worlds without ever facing effective resistance. Phase 1 of the Deception campaign is complete, announced Lieutenant Colonel Kim. The Devourers have positioned themselves according to their standard attack patterns, assuming they're facing conventional Zilithian defenses. On the tactical displays, the enemy fleet had arranged itself in the formation they used for systematic planetary consumption. The command ship positioned to begin atmospheric processing while smaller vessels secured orbital space and eliminated defensive installations. It was a formation that had proven unstoppable against every previous target. But this time, they weren't facing a typical Federation species with predictable defensive strategies. This time, they were about to encounter what the galaxy would later call the Deathworld response. Initiate Tactical Shift Alpha, Captain Rivera ordered. Let's show them what happens when pacifists learn to fight like humans. Across the Zephyria system, defensive installations that had appeared destroyed suddenly revealed their true nature. What the Devourers had taken for debris fields were actually cloaked weapon platforms. Energy signatures they had learned to ignore as harmless research stations began outputting devastating focused beams that could slice through their biomechanical hulls. Most importantly, the Zilithian defenders stopped fighting like scientists trying to solve a problem and started fighting like humans protecting their home. Instead of optimal responses, they used unpredictable tactics. Instead of efficient resource allocation, they employed overwhelming force at unexpected points. Instead of logical defensive positions, they struck from directions that made no tactical sense according to standard military doctrine. The enemy fleet is showing confusion patterns, Kethra reported from her position monitoring Devourer communications. Their coordination is breaking down as their tactical algorithms fail to predict our responses. The beautiful, flowing movements of the Devourer swarm began to stutter and fragment as they encountered resistance that didn't follow any pattern in their extensive combat database. Ships that should have been destroyed were somehow still fighting. Weapons that appeared exhausted suddenly unleashed devastating second volleys. Defensive positions that logic dictated should be abandoned instead became launching points for impossible counterattacks. Dr. Rodriguez monitored the biological analysis of enemy forces in real time, watching as human-inspired biotechnology began to take effect. The adaptive disruption protocols are working, she announced. Their biological systems are being forced into rapid evolution cycles, but the changes are becoming increasingly unstable. The Zilithians had learned to weaponize their enemy's greatest strength. Instead of trying to counter Devourer adaptation, they were forcing it to happen so rapidly that the enemy's own biology became self-destructive. Viral agents that mimicked natural evolutionary pressures pushed Devourer organisms to adapt beyond their stability thresholds. But the real surprise came when the first wave of Devourer assault craft reached Zephyria's upper atmosphere. Instead of encountering the energy shields and automated defenses they expected, they found themselves facing something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Human military advisors had helped the Zilithians understand that the best defense against an adaptive enemy was an opponent that adapted faster. The planet's atmospheric defenses weren't static installations. They were swarms of semi-intelligent combat drones that could evolve new tactics faster than biological organisms could respond. Drone Swarm 7 has developed a new attack pattern, Lieutenant Colonel Kim reported with barely contained excitement. They're using coordinated electromagnetic pulses to disrupt enemy bioelectrical systems before the Devourers can adapt their shielding. The battle in Zephyria's atmosphere became a showcase of what happened when human military creativity merged with Zilithian technological sophistication. Defensive systems that could learn and adapt in real time faced off against biological weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Devourers were losing. Sarah found herself coordinating communications between human advisors and Zilithian tactical groups, watching as two very different approaches to problem-solving created synergies neither species could have achieved alone. Human unpredictability gave direction to Zilithian precision, while Zilithian technology gave substance to human tactical innovations. The command ship is beginning its atmospheric processing sequence, announced Vorthak, the Zilithian military commander whose patterns now pulsed with the aggressive configurations human advisors had taught him. But they're doing it according to their standard timeline, assuming minimal resistance. Then, let's give them a very non-standard surprise. Captain Rivera responded with a grim smile. The final phase of the defense plan required the most sophisticated coordination yet attempted between human and Zilithian forces. Instead of trying to prevent the command ship from beginning planetary processing, they were going to let it start, and then turn its own capabilities against it. Zilithian biotechnology had created microscopic agents designed to integrate with the command ship's processing systems. But instead of being consumed and converted like normal planetary resources, these agents carried instructions derived from human-computer warfare doctrine, viral programming designed to spread through the ship's biological networks and corrupt its operational parameters. Bioviral deployment successful, Dr. Rodriguez reported as the command ship's processing beams made contact with Zephyria's surface. The ship is beginning to consume our prepared materials. What the Devourers didn't know was that they were consuming biological agents that carried the essence of human military thinking. The concept that any system could be turned against itself with sufficient understanding and creativity. The microscopic warriors flowing into their ship carried tactical instructions that would reprogram their biological networks from within. The effect began subtly, as command ship systems started making small errors in resource allocation and processing prioritization. But as the bioviral agents spread through the ship's networks, the errors became more significant. Processing systems began competing with each other instead of cooperating. Navigation protocols started implementing contradictory instructions. Most critically, the ship's biological evolution mechanisms began adapting to threats that didn't exist while ignoring actual damage. The command ship is developing internal conflicts, Kethra reported with patterns that could only be described as a maze satisfaction. Its subsystems are fighting each other according to human tactical principles we embedded in the bioviral programming. What the Zilithians had accomplished was unprecedented in galactic warfare. They had taught an enemy ship to fight itself using human military doctrine that assumed intelligent opposition. The command ship's own adaptation mechanisms were now treating other parts of the ship as hostile entities to be countered and defeated. The massive vessel began to convulse as internal warfare consumed its resources and coordination capabilities. Sections of the ship turned their weapons on other sections. Biological processing systems began consuming the ship's own structural materials. Navigation systems started implementing evasive maneuvers to avoid threats that existed only within their own corrupted programming. Devourer fleet cohesion is collapsing, Lieutenant Colonel Kim announced, as enemy formations throughout the system began to fragment. Without coordination from the command ship, their individual vessels are reverting to basic survival protocols. The smaller Devourer craft, designed to operate under command ship guidance, found themselves without tactical direction as their central coordination node consumed itself from within. Some began attacking each other in confusion. Others attempted to flee the system. Most simply drifted aimlessly as their biological programming struggled to adapt to the loss of hierarchical command structure. But the victory came with a sobering realization about what humanity had just accomplished. Sarah watched the destruction of the command ship with mixed emotions, understanding that they had just demonstrated capabilities that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed both humans and Earth. "We didn't just save the Zilithians," she said quietly to Captain Rivera as they observed the enemy fleet's collapse. "We showed the entire galaxy what humans are capable of when we apply military thinking to advanced technology." The implications were enormous. Word of the victory was already spreading through Federation communication networks, carried by Zilithian broadcasts to allied species throughout the region. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers had been not just defeated, but utterly routed by an enemy that fought with principles they couldn't understand or counter. Over the following days, as the last Devourer vessels fled the system or were destroyed by pursuing Zilithian forces, the full scope of what had been accomplished became clear. The bioviral agents had not only destroyed the command ship, but had spread to other Devourer vessels, carrying with them the disruptive tactical principles that made their biological systems fight themselves. "We've received communications from 17 Federation species requesting military consultation," Nalith informed the human team during the post-battle assessment. "They want to learn how to implement similar defensive strategies against future Devourer incursions." Dr. Rodriguez had been analyzing the biological samples recovered from destroyed enemy ships, making discoveries that revolutionized understanding of the Devourer expansion. "They're not actually a single species," she reported. "They're a collective of absorbed biological materials from dozens of consumed worlds, held together by artificial coordination protocols." The revelation explained both their strength and the effectiveness of human-inspired countermeasures. The Devourers were powerful because they incorporated the biological advantages of every species they consumed, but they were vulnerable to tactical approaches that disrupted coordination between different biological systems. which means every world they've consumed has made them stronger, but also more complex and harder to coordinate, Captain Rivera realized. Human military doctrine is particularly effective against them because we specialize in fighting enemies with internal contradictions and competing priorities. The victory at Zephyria became the template for a new form of galactic defense that combined human tactical thinking with advanced alien technology. Within months, Federation species throughout the region had implemented human-inspired adaptive defense systems that could evolve faster than Devour biology could counter them. But the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The species that had been quarantined as dangerous Deathworlders was now recognized as the key to defending peaceful civilizations against existential threats. The Galactic Federation has formally invited Earth to join as a protector species, Ambassador Shaw announced during a secure communication from Earth. They're offering full membership with voting rights and access to Federation technology in exchange for military consultation and defense coordination. Sarah found herself part of the first human delegation to the Federation capital world, traveling aboard a Zilithian ship equipped with the latest improvements derived from their joint technological development. The journey that had taken days using standard Zilithian FTL now required only hours using systems enhanced with human engineering principles. The Federation capital was a wonder of peaceful civilization, a world where dozens of species had created a harmonious society based on cooperation and shared knowledge. But as the human delegation was welcomed by Federation leadership, Sarah could see the changes their intervention had already created. Military consultation centers staffed by human advisors were being established on key worlds. Federation species were implementing tactical training programs based on human military doctrine. Most significantly, the galaxy was beginning to understand that sometimes the most effective protectors of peace were those who understood war. Your species has given us something we had forgotten we needed, explained Chancellor Vexhai of the Federation Council during the formal welcome ceremony. The willingness to fight for peace when peace cannot be maintained through diplomacy alone. The irony was not lost on Sarah or her colleagues. Humanity's violent history, the very characteristic that had made other species wary of contact, had become their greatest gift to galactic civilization. The Deathworld traits that evolved through millennia of competition and conflict were now protecting species that had transcended such struggles. But perhaps the most profound change was in the relationship between humans and Zilithians themselves. The two species had become true partners, their very different approaches to existence complementing each other in ways neither had anticipated. Kethera, who had been selected as the Zilithian liaison to Earth, expressed it best during their return journey to humanity's home system. "We taught you our science, and you taught us your wisdom. Together, we learned that survival requires both understanding and the will to act on that understanding." As Earth came into view through the transport's viewing portal, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that night 6 weeks ago when she first detected an alien signal. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, isolated on their small blue world. They had become protectors of galactic peace, partners in an alliance that spanned star systems, and teachers of survival to species far more advanced than themselves. The wrong hands had indeed received that desperate SOS from across the galaxy. But as Sarah watched Earth grow larger in the viewport, she realized they had been exactly the right hands after all. Sometimes the universe needed Deathworlders to protect the civilizations that had transcended the need to be warriors themselves. And sometimes being feared was the first step to being respected, trusted, and ultimately loved by beings who understood that peace was only possible when someone was willing to fight for it. The signal that had started as a plea for help had become the foundation of humanity's place among the stars, not as conquerors or invaders, but as the guardians who stood ready when darkness threatened the light of civilization. In the end, the Deathworlders had come not to destroy, but to protect, and the galaxy would never be the same.